So it's wonderful to have you back. I'm really excited for today's conversation and diving into this new series. It's interesting. I was
Hmm.
thinking at first, like, oh, radical relationships was a great name for this new segment. But then I realized like our relationship and what we call our relationship is a spiritual partnership, and I just thought that was like a really beautiful name for these segments, these episodes that are going to be coming out that we're going to be doing together. What do you think of that name?
The spiritual relationships,
Spiritual partnerships instead of
spiritual,
radical relationships.
spiritual partnerships. Yeah, I like it a lot better than radical. Radical just sounds super intense, I feel like, but spiritual seems like it's more from a place of love as well, more light energy attached to it in a way.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I feel about it.
that's fair.
But so yeah, I like it a lot better.
Nice. It's funny because we're going to be talking about radical honesty, and we already have some feelings on that word.
True, but in that conversation, I feel like radical honesty makes a lot more sense because it it seems like it brings a lot more, how can I put it, not necessarily weight, but creates, I think, more impact on the type of conversation that it is or that can be,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, the emphasis, right?
Yes, yes, more emphasis on what it all is about, which is a
Yeah.
really important topic. And yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you about it. I
Yeah.
think that it's something that has helped our relationship a lot. And I think that all couples really need to incorporate it into their relationships, but it's not easy. And I don't think it's talked about a lot either. So
Right.
conversations like these help.
Yeah. No, I think that they make a huge difference. Um, and yeah, I'd love to know from your perspective, because of course we talked about, doing these segments and talking about relationships and we kind of were going to talk about a different topic, but then decided that radical honesty was really the best place to start. Why do you think that is?
No, yeah, that's a great question. I think that that is probably the best place to start with because it serves as the foundation of everything else that is to come. One of the things that we have talked about and one of the values that we have incorporated into our relationship is to be honest, have honesty in our relationship. And if you don't have honesty, then you really don't have anything else and can't build on top of it. So I think that's the beginning for sure, or the conversation that needs to be had first. And then from that point on, you can build on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree that it's like it's a pillar. It's one of the most important pillars that make up the foundation of a relationship because there are so many things that can't be experienced within a relationship without radical honesty. But again, like you spoke about, I think that, both you and I, as we've been together for the past, 6.5 years, whatever, we've encountered so many couples, married, not married, whomever, who aren't honest with each other and who don't share this value. And we're both just consistently kind of blown away by that. And also, I know it's difficult for me to really imagine being in a relationship and not being radically honest. And at the same time, I can think back to when I was younger and, you don't have a relationship background, but I know that when I was younger and in relationships, and not sure of myself then and still growing and those sorts of things that I wasn't able to show up and be radically honest. I think that I was a lot more straightforward you know, than than I saw my friends being in relationship, but still there was a lot that I held back. So, I think that on the front end, it's important just to say that we wanted to bring this topic to you all and to start here, but there's no shame, there's no guilt. Everyone's on their own path, and we just feel like it's important to talk about this because of all of the things that can be built upon a relationship that has honesty. It's so important for the health of the individuals in a relationship and for the relationship itself. So, where I'd love for us to start, of course, is to define what radical honesty is, um, so that we can really set the foundation for this conversation. So, Carlos, I'd love to know what you think radical honesty is.
Yes, radical honesty, I would say that is when you don't have anything really to hide when it comes to being in a relationship, communicating, really just everyday life, right? Where you are just completely honest with yourself, one, but also with the individuals in your life. And at the same time, I don't think you need to share like every little detail about your life with your loved ones, but definitely the important items, just having no reservations in terms of what those important items are that you're sharing with everyone that's involved in your life.
Nice.
That's,
Yeah.
what do you think it is? Or
Yeah,
how
I
would
wrote
you?
down I wrote down a couple of things. So one, I think it's being vulnerable enough to share my thoughts and feelings, which I think is huge. You can't really be honest without being vulnerable. And that takes bravery, right? That's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and doing so at the risk of causing strife, right? Which none of us want. Like, we're not trying to cause problems. We don't want to upset the other person. And when you are radically honest, it really requires you to step out and potentially cause friction or issues, depending upon what it is you're talking about. Um, Being willing to be honest about who I am and what I need in a relationship, is a part of that. Sharing my thoughts and feelings from a place of love to the best of my ability, and really being true to myself, right? I think that it's so important for, when we come to a relationship, we're really hoping to come from a place of wholeness versus like need, right? So that when we come into a relationship, we're there because we want to be, not because we need to be. And when we come into a relationship from that place, we are more able to be true to ourselves, and I think that radical honesty is so much about first being true to ourselves and then being true to our partner, being true to the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I like that a lot. You basically elaborated into kind of the one thing that I share. And some of the thoughts I was having too earlier today is that before you can have that radical honesty, you really need with other people in your lives. I think you really need to first be self-aware about who you are, what you like, what you don't like, your strengths, your weaknesses. Just really have a full, complete picture of who you are as an individual. I think that would be the first step. And then the second step is just completely being honest with yourself and accepting yourself. And I think at that point, it will make it a lot easier to be able to actually be honest with your loved ones and your partner.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so right. I mean, the thing is like what I'm thinking of when you say accepting yourself, because that is a huge component of it, because like I know for me as an emotional person, I can have feelings that come up and I don't want them to be there. And I don't want to be experiencing them. And I don't want to, and in that, when I'm not wanting to experience the emotions, that I'm not wanting to share them with my partner. So I'm not wanting to be honest about what it is that's going on, right? But I have to really accept them first and just be like, okay, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm feeling, and be able to share and communicate that, with you, so that then we can handle it and move forward and find a solution. But if I don't accept myself, or I don't accept my feelings, or the things that I don't like, or, the things that cross my boundaries, or whatever the case may be in our relationship, then I'm not going to be able to show up and be that honest person, with you, because I'll be in conflict with myself. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And you won't be able to communicate those things to your partner as well.
Right.
If you don't take the time to get to know them and to accept them. Because yeah, I feel like a lot of people may not be happy with their current situation or where they currently are. But I think it's really important to appreciate where you are, right? Because it may not be where you currently want to be, but it's definitely not where you have been or where you were. That's what Joyce Myers always says, which I really appreciate. So, yeah, just being able to fully understand who you are as an individual and then accepting yourself and being okay with it, I think serves as kind of the pillar or one of the pillars before you can have that radical honesty with other people in your life. So you need to have it first with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. So let's talk about some components that I think are necessary for people to have in a relationship in order to be able to utilize radical honesty. Because I think there are definitely some things that have to be in place in order for people to be able to show up. Um, the
Mm-hmm.
ones that I wrote down are safety, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling safe within your relationship is huge, because if you are with someone who shuts you down, who gaslights you, who isn't interested in listening to you, then being honest is going to be very difficult, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel safe to be so. And a lot of us grew up in homes where we didn't feel safe to express our thoughts and our feelings. And so we struggle with that when we get into relationships. And so I think that's a natural sort of progression and just something that we have to, again, be aware of so that we can say, okay, let me talk to my partner. Let me see how this goes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The second one being trust. I also have respect and then
Mm-hmm.
compassion for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some of the components that you think, like what's the foundation for the foundation of radical
Mm-hmm.
honesty?
Yeah, those are all really good. I like those a lot. What you say? Safety, respect, trust, and compassion.
Compassion.
Yeah, I was thinking respect. I think, yeah, just really creating the environment. And I think it's also important to kind of set some expectations about the conversations that you're going to have and kind of also let your partner know what you're needing, what you're seeking from the conversation. If you're going to talk about a difficult subject, sometimes, or not sometimes, but a lot of times, what you and I do is that I let you know, hey, I want to share this, and I really need you to be open, and this is really important to me or for me. So setting those expectations, communicating with your partner. So another big one will be that, yes, just that communication, and kind of how you shared earlier, just to be transparent about how you're feeling. All that is really important. I think necessary
Yeah,
to be able to have those conversations.
for sure, for sure. I want to like bookmark that, because I want to come back to that when we start talking about how to practice radical honesty, because that's a really huge component. Um, Maybe let's kind of like dive into the pros and cons of radical honesty. What are some pros
Mm-hmm.
and cons for you?
Some comes that come to mind is that it's difficult to have radical honesty, especially from the beginning. When partners may not be used to it or they may feel unsafe. So I think from the beginning it can be difficult. A pro, I would say, is that if you are truly radical honest or sharing that radical honesty with your partner, then once it's completed, once you're done sharing whatever you have to share, I I feel like you'll feel really good about yourself, right? And your peace of mind will be there,
Mhm.
where you know for a fact that you didn't hold back and you were honest, and that's all we can do. And then at that point, what the other person does or how they choose to react will be on them. But you will definitely know you did the right thing and you were completely honest, and that's worth a lot. So those are
Yeah.
one pro, one con that comes to mind.
So balanced you are.
I'm sure more will come. But what about you? What are the ones that you have?
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about our relationship, and I mean, you know, we've really been practicing radical honesty in our relationship from the very beginning. And I think it's just because of who we are and then the circumstances in which we came together. Um, and, you know, how we really did come together when we were both in a very solid place within our own individual lives, you know, and both of us are very strong individual people. And so, really, from the beginning, it was kind of intense because I would be very direct and straightforward about what I wanted and who I was and what was going on. And you were the same, you know, you you wouldn't put up with things that you shouldn't put up with. You were always very honest with me about your thoughts and feelings. You always let me know from the very beginning what you wanted and what you needed, you know, for yourself in our relationship. Like I remember early on, um, Carlos looking at me, and I think we had been dating for a couple of weeks, and he was like, "Look, I need to have one weekend night to myself." And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, what are you going to be doing? And here I was thinking that he was going to be like, I'll be hanging out with my guys, my boys, whatever, like doing my thing. And he was like, well, I like to sit in my room and think about my future and be by myself and listen to music. And
Mhm.
and I was just like, okay. And from my end, you know, I was like, you gotta leave by 5 a.m. because I have a strict morning routine, and that's just a non-negotiable for me. You know, like those things were really
Mhm.
set up from the very beginning for us. But some of the things that I wrote down. So one, pros, it ensures resentment doesn't build up. You know, I think
Mm.
resentment is like one of the most
Mhm.
poisonous things that can seep into a relationship. And once that starts happening, man, you got to excavate that shit. Otherwise, it can turn into some really, really negative things within, you know, like passive aggressive behaviors, belittling your partners. Like it is negative. And
Mhm.
so when you're honest and you know about how you feel and what's going on, like you nix that resentment,
Mhm.
and so it doesn't build up. Two, I think it
Yeah.
creates intimacy.
Mhm.
You know, when you're honest with someone and you feel heard, like you feel closer with them, you feel more bonded with them. It really creates a lot of beautiful intimacy between two people.
Mhm.
It promotes respect, you know,
I
because
was just
both
thinking
people are being
that.
honest. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
I
on
was just
we're
gonna
on
say
that
that.
wavelength lately. um, the fourth thing is I think it's healthy for both individuals. Like I think it's so healthy to practice radical honesty, not only within your romantic relationships, but within all of your relationships.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's better to be honest. And then
Yeah,
finally, I
I
think
was just gonna say that too.
what?
That it helps create, well, I was gonna add to it, but that being radically honest helps establish those healthy boundaries, which are really important to have in all your relationships, but especially in your romantic ones.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's great for family. It's good for friends. I mean, like, I think radical honesty is important for all relationships. Um, and then the last pro that I have is it promotes individuality within a union, which I think
Hmm.
for you and I is not much of an issue because both of us are such independent people. But I think that within typical relationships, it's very easy for people to blend into each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're honest, you're able to stay in contact with your own feelings and your own emotions about things versus just being like, oh, it's fine. Oh, I can just, yeah, I'll be good. I can just go along with it. I can just, you know what I mean? And you kind of just start
Mm-hmm.
blending in with your partner.
Yeah, I think that's really important to keep that individuality in your relationships. Because if you don't, right, like, like you said, if you blend into the other person, I feel like that could get boring, could cause the other person to lose respect for their partner. It just doesn't keep it interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's the opposite, then people are maybe more intrigued by your individuality, the things that you enjoy doing, your hobby, whatever it may be, keeps it definitely more interesting. So yeah, I think that's very important to keep that in and maintain that in your romantic relationships.
Yeah. And I think that this is honestly more of a thing for women than men because women were just, we're grown up and taught to be quiet, to be agreeable, to go along, um, to not cause any problems or friction. And so being radically honest is, I think, way harder for women than it is for men for a number of different reasons, but also because as women, we are just naturally like the nurturers in a relationship and we give. And, this can be for any person within a relationship who's really, full of that feminine energy. Um, and I just think that we just can naturally I've seen my girlfriends blend into their, into the partners way more than I've seen my guy friend. Like I don't see that so much with my guy friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't mean to make it so black and white about the genders, but this is just, from my experiences throughout the past several decades. I think it's just women naturally, blend a little easier. So I think that radical
Mm-hmm.
honesty can really help us to stay attached to who we are instead of just going with the flow about everything. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it can definitely empower both parties, but I can see your perspective about the women, how they can blend in more than men. I think a lot of that has to do with right society, how women are brought up into the world, but by allowing each other to keep that individuality, then that really empowers that person to step into who they are and continue to develop, which is really important for anyone's life.
yeah, huge, huge. So the cons that I have on my list are it can cause problems by upsetting the other person. And,
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to work with this, which we will definitely talk about when we talk about the best ways to practice radical honesty. But yeah, it can be upsetting to the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even if it is shared, in a more compassionate way, it can be really painful to receive
Mm-hmm.
as well. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that whether you're giving it or taking it, it can be painful. um, and I think that's just, Carlos and I often talk about this because he has always been way better at handling the radical honesty than I
Mm-hmm.
have. I'm great at giving it, but he is like Superman at taking it. Like just not a lot hurts him. I always tell him it's like one of his superpowers that he can take it much more easily. And I'm like, oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely have come to appreciate that within myself because it definitely makes life a little bit more easy to deal with and not get lost into what other people think, their opinions and all that stuff. But I can definitely see the cons with that radical honesty. Because yeah, it can be, the truth hurts, right? That's what a phrase that's used a lot. The truth hurts, and it's real. People can feel that energy and the pain that comes from someone else telling you what they think, and you know, if it's true, then it hurts even a lot more. And that's why I think it's really important to be honest with yourself, because that can help you get this how can I put it? It would help you just better take that feedback if you kind of already know that about yourself and you accept that within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think too, in a true, in a spiritual partnership, which again, I'm so glad that I was tuned in to rename it spiritual partnerships, because I think that within a true spiritual partnership, the thing is that your partner sees your blind spots. Your partner is aware of things that you're not aware of, and they can bring these things to you in a way that helps you to grow and evolve and become a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And again, going back to those like pros, when it's shared within a mutually respective partnership, then it can be so beneficial to your life, because yeah, your
Mm-hmm.
partner might say, bring something to your attention that you're not aware of, that you don't know that you're doing, but that can help you not only within the relationship, but maybe within your work relationship, like within your work, within your all of these outside relationships as well. It can really help you just become a better person. And that's ultimately what we're here to do, I believe, in a relationship, is help each other become the best versions of ourselves. But that
Mm-hmm.
requires, you know, also not just the, oh, I love you, you're awesome, but also the like, honey, you
Yeah.
might want to XYZ, or
Yeah, that's a really good point for sure. A good example of that with our relationship is you have definitely helped me see that sometimes I miss social cues, and you know that recently came up with work, right? With a lot of work that I do, it's really important to pay attention to social cues, both professionally and in your personal life. And you helping me see that just brings more awareness. And then within myself, right, I have to accept that about myself, which I do. You know, nothing wrong with that. And then at that point, I can make the choice to do something about it and change it for my benefit. So yeah, I agree. That's another great pro in terms of having that radical honesty. But like I just said, the other person also has to be open and keep an open mind to what the other partner shares. So that's a really important component as well.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so let's kind of go ahead and dive into the best ways to practice it, and within a couple. And I mean, we'll just kind of go back and forth here, but I think what you were sharing a minute ago, about it really starting with yourself, I think is
Mm-hmm.
key. Because it really does start with us individually before, that can be brought into a relationship. And it's not like you have to be perfect. It's not like you have to completely understand who you are and be fully self-aware and all of that. That's not it at all. Um, just taking the time to even evaluate yourself and start thinking about what are the things that are important for you to have in a relationship. What are the things, what are your boundaries? What are the rules? What are the non-negotiables for you? Like who are you? Just starting to think about these things is going to be really helpful when it comes to then stepping into a relationship. Whether you are single or even if you are already in a relationship, you can start doing these things and then start bringing it to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so do you want to share kind of a couple of things from your end?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like we've been talking. Yeah, I would say it has to start with the individual. Step one would be self-aware, and to add to what you said is just to be curious about yourself, continue to get to know yourself. And that'll be the first step as an individual. The second step, I would say, kind of how we've been talking about also, is just to completely accept who you are and not be shameful about it, or whatever other feelings you may have about it. Just completely accept who you are and where you are in life. And I think it's also important to understand that you're not going to stay there forever if you are the type of person that wants to continue to grow and develop. So those two things, self-aware, accepting yourself, create the foundation as the individual. And I think that will really help you be in a position to start being radically honest with your partner. And then at that point, obviously, there's a lot more things that go into it. I think you really need to talk about communication with your partner and how important that is for each of you to be able to communicate and share how you feel, what's on your mind. And then within that, there's more things, right, that you have to follow. Forgot the title of it, but we're still working on this. But what is it called? The little script that couples use. There's something script, I can remember. You know what I'm talking about? Where you say, hey, I want to share something with you. It's now a good time. And then you
Oh,
give the other person a chance to respond.
yeah. I mean, I don't think we need to go into all of that. We don't need to get like overly technical because there's plenty of couples therapists out there who have super specific techniques for how to talk with each other. Um, one of the things I wanted to just kind of point out real quick too before we jump into that is
Mm-hmm.
like building off of what you were saying, Carlos, the thing is when you take the time to understand what's important to you, it's easier for you to then voice that. If you don't know
Mm-hmm.
what you want, then you're going to have a really difficult time, actually being able to stand up for it. Um, and again, I'm
Mm-hmm.
really coming at this from a female perspective, because it's just so easy for us to kind of whitewash our feelings and emotions and be just like, we don't like it or we like it, or instead of really taking the time to understand, like, this is one of my values. This is one of the things that are most important to me. This is what I need in my relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to like the best ways to practice it, some of the things that I had written down was one, like, be calm, aware, and present. It's really important to do that. Set up a time to talk. So don't just jump into each other's space and try to have a radically honest conversation. Like, this is what you were just talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So taking like 5 minutes to be like, hey, so I would like to talk with you about something that upset me the other day. When would be a good time for you?
Mm-hmm.
And then scheduling that out. And, um, you know, you and I have gotten really good at this because I know for me, my nervous system like flat out couldn't handle at the beginning of our relationship when you would just want to share something with me. It would freak me out. And I would get triggered and I would be defensive and I wouldn't be able to listen to you because I would be scared. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that I thought you were going to break up with me or anything like that. It was just like a lot of old feelings would come up, and out of nowhere, like, I'm in trouble, I've done something wrong, I'm bad, I'm like, there's, again, old feelings. And I only point those out because I think it might be helpful for anyone who's listening. If your partner wants to talk to you and you feel triggered, then it's important to get curious about that and think about, okay, so why am I getting triggered? But when we set up this time to talk, or we have time set aside to talk, then it's easier for me to show up and be fully present so that I'm not in that freak out mode or as apt to be defensive. So I can actually fully take in what Carlos wants to share with me, which I can't do if someone just jumps in. And I think
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm not alone in this by any means. I mean, you're even the same way as well, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for the most part, I would say it's really helpful for you to ask me if now is a good time or not.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, if it's not a good time or I don't want to talk about it in that moment, it's not gonna probably go the best. You know, I'm probably not gonna be fully present. I'm not gonna listen to everything you're saying. You know, my emotions may be high, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better to ask for that permission. Make sure it's okay with your partner. As you were talking, one of the things that came to mind too that could be helpful when practicing this is that you've shared with me that sometimes you want me to incorporate the touch part of it, the human touch, like maybe like grab your hand uh, gently, or just kind of reach out to you with my hand gently in a calm way, and then say, "Hey, I want to share this with you. It's not a good time." But that has been helpful for you in the past, in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that gentleness is so important, especially if you're sharing something that you know may be triggering to your partner or maybe really upset them or maybe very difficult for them to hear. Really being able to share it with them from a gentle, compassionate place is huge. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm continuously reminding Carlos because I think I have such a intense, kind of strong personality, like how tender I am, because I'm like all goo inside. And I think that, not just Carlos, but a lot of people are not as gentle with me because I don't come off as gentle. And so I think that they kind of think I don't need that, or, because I come off as tough that I can handle it. But like, oh my gosh, I'm so sensitive. And I'm also very sensitive to to someone sharing feedback that may really hurt my feelings. So, and of course it depends on what mood I'm in. Sometimes it's fine, but yeah, I definitely think that can be good. Um, Another thing I have on my list is respecting, if the other person isn't in a place to talk, like we
Mm-hmm.
really have to respect where people are at and
Mm-hmm.
know
Not
that that
force
is
it.
valid. We have learned in our relationship that the nighttime is dangerous for Carlos and the morning is dangerous for Anna.
Yes.
So we don't have serious conversations at night, and we do not talk about serious things first thing in the morning. you know, and we've just had to learn that through trial and error. And it has definitely, it has been painful at times
Mm-hmm.
with,
Yeah.
Carlos like being extra impatient at night and or falling asleep and not being able to fully participate, or Anna being way too sensitive in the morning and then just really getting super angry very quickly. And so I think finding those cues within your relationship and understanding, the quirks of who you are within a relationship is going to be key for these things. But just respecting, like if you do come to your person and you say, "Hey, I want to talk about this," respecting when they let you know. We have to do that for our partners. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's just part of it.
Yeah. Another one that came to mind is kind of you can add to the respect component is to let's make sure that you're listening to actually listen and not listening to respond. I think everyone is a victim of that, including ourselves, because yeah, it's difficult when people are sharing things that you may not want to listen to, or they're painful. In your head, you're just kind of thinking about what you want to say. So I think it's really important to take a step back and really give that to your partner, your ability to be able to really listen, right? And I think one thing that can help you with that, which you mentioned, is just having that curiosity as to why your partner is sharing what they're sharing, or why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. And I think that component can really help you be more present as well and take it
Yeah,
all in. And
it's
then give them
huge.
this space, and then give them this actual space to share and respond. without
Yes,
interrupting, especially.
as I keep interrupting you.
Yeah.
It's so important for both people though, right? It's like it makes the person who is sharing feel safe and heard and validated, which is huge. And
Hmm.
then for the person who's listening, they're actually learning something if they're actively listening.
Hmm.
Because if you're actively listening to what's going on with your part, you are learning something new about them. Like they're not going to be sharing information with you that you already know. Because if you already knew it, then you probably wouldn't be having that conversation to begin with. And even if you maybe understand something that they're sharing with you, like you're going to learn something in that process. Listening is just so important. Um,
Hmm.
we kind of touched on this a little bit, but being kind when you're sharing potentially triggering information, I think is
Hmm.
massive. This whole idea of radical honesty, in some respects, it's almost like shoving your honesty down someone's throat. I know that
Hmm.
people have said that to me before. It's like, yeah, I should just be like radically honest with you. And like, we have to remember that we're talking to people.
Hmm.
And in our trying to, now I'm not being able to speak, but in our trying to reach out and communicate, we have to be mindful of that and really be present. And I think that if we're not present, then we can really run the risk of saying potentially very hurtful things,
Hmm.
um, in a way that we didn't need to, you know, um, like adding components in that weren't necessary, being additionally emotional, which just heightens the problem. Like there's a number of things there,
Hmm.
um, but just really aiming for kindness when being honest.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think being kind also means taking the time to really think about, there's that phrase, right? It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So really taking the time to think about how you're going to share something with your partner and maybe the words that you're going to use, or instead of just being so cutthroat and direct. I
Yeah.
think if you take the time to do that, you are being kind and gentle towards your partner. And I know that happens with us a lot. That's kind of my personality, to kind of be very direct and cut through. And then if I do share something in a way that it's not the kindest, then I come back and ask you, "Oh, okay, well, how would you prefer me to share that?" And that has been really helpful to kind of get your feedback. And then I say that immediately and things get better.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things that we set up, I think, pretty early in our relationship that has been so helpful, not only within our relationship, but even within my other relationships, because I utilize it there now too, is this question: can I share something with you?
hmm.
Before just dumping information on our partners, because we don't need to always set up a talk for every little thing.
Hmm.
Radical honesty can definitely be those bigger conversations, but sometimes like we just need to share something in the midst of a conversation or in the midst of an activity or whatever the case may be. And having that sort of like setup between the two of you, like, hey, can I share something with you? For me, it's been really huge because again, it gives me that ability. Harville and Helen Hendricks are two, like, I don't know that couples therapists is actually their like titles, but they work with couples. They're both psychologists. They're incredible. And
Your
they talk
family?
about, huh?
So, are they your family?
No, this. Um, they talk about how people are consistently running, their own movie in their own head. We're all in a trance state a lot of the times. And so
Hmm.
if you just jump out at someone and talk without first getting their attention, you really run the risk of triggering someone, especially if it's something intense. So incorporating this simple question, can I share something with you first? and then allowing that person to respond and say yes, and then sharing it can really help set up that safe space. So it's kind of like, okay, let me bring myself here to presence and center and fully listen to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. As you were sharing that, another thought came to mind when you were talking about stories. That's something that Andy from the meditation app that I use, Headspace, he shares a lot about how we all have storylines in our heads and we exist and spend a lot of time in our heads. And a lot of these storylines are not necessarily real or they're not reality, you know? So I think when we have these storylines, we tend to assume a lot of things that may not be accurate. So I think taking a step back and not making these assumptions is a good practice as well. To first take the time to find out how your partner is feeling or what they meant. So you're both on the same page and things are not misunderstood or taken out of context. I
Yeah.
think that's really important also.
Yeah. So I want to go over a couple of ways for couples to start easing into radical honesty. And this could be you if you're a listener and maybe you're thinking like, I want to incorporate this into my relationship. How do I do this with my partner? Just a couple of easy steps here. So first of all, I think it's important to approach your partner about wanting to incorporate it. Just start off that conversation, talk about maybe why you think it would be beneficial. The second thing is, I think, set up some time to learn about it together. Maybe tune into this podcast, maybe do some research online together, and really learn about it together. The third thing would be to set up rules and boundaries for yourself and your particular relationship and define what radical honesty looks like for you. Because while Carlos and I have been talking about what it looks like for us, every relationship is different. And so take what we have shared, take what might resonate with you and then create your own. But when you're both on the same page in regards to what radical honesty looks like for you, what your boundaries and rules are around that, that will be really helpful for you. And then you can begin playing within that space. And then the fourth thing would be to put it into action. The next time that something comes up, like start practicing it, even with small things, start scheduling time to start working on this in the midst of dealing with an upsetting situation or something that you need to be radically honest about. And again, it doesn't have to be like this big discussion. It can also just be like, hey, can I share something with you? And start practicing it there. And know that this is going to take time. This is not it's not like we were pros at this overnight. I mean, we've been working at this for years and we still, misstep sometimes. And I think we're still like too honest with each other or too direct sometimes. And we have to like take a couple of steps back. It's not like your relationship or any relationship is going to be perfect overnight. And so it's continually having grace for growing in that process with each other. But if you set up these foundational pieces, then you can start easing into it. And I think what's most important about that is that you do it together and it works for both of you. Do you have anything you would like to share about that, Carlos?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like all that stuff for sure. What I would add is, and we keep coming back to it because I think it's really important, right? Is just make sure that you put the individual work to get to know yourself and accept yourself. Also, I think it could be really helpful to talk with your partner about how this can help your relationship. Like think about why you may need to start being radically honest with each other and what your relationship can look like after you start incorporating it. Because yeah, I mean, obviously we can talk from our personal experience that it creates a more meaningful partnership and relationship and creates more intimacy, all the good stuff. And it's really worth it. So I think those two items. There was another one that I was thinking about, but it left my mind. So if it comes back to me, I'll share it. But those two I would add.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So just some of the final things that I want to share here, just some final things. I'd love to just hear from you, Carlos, like, you know, what you like most, I guess, about the radical honesty in a relationship, and then I'll share mine, and we can wind down here.
Hmm. What I like most about the radical honesty. Well, kind of what comes to mind is something that can be applied to everyday life, but obviously in your romantic relationship as well, is that if you have a really good moral compass, then you really don't have anything to worry about. And that just brings a lot of, I think, joy and also, like I mentioned earlier, just peace of mind. And that all that combined can just lead to a more harmonious and meaningful life. So that's what I think.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point for sure. Yeah, because then we aren't like, oh my gosh, did I tell my wife this, or did I tell my husband this, or like, oh my, like, what if they find out, or yeah, any of that
Hmm. Yeah, less
nonsense,
stress life.
less stress. So for me, I wrote down number one, it helps me to know, like, to feel like I always know where I stand with you. You know, I
Hmm.
because I trust that if you are unhappy with something within a relationship, that you're going to share it with me, or if you're unhappy about something with me, or if there's something going on with you that I need to know, like, you're not going to come out of left field with things so much. You know what I mean? It makes me feel secure about our relationship because we are
Mm.
honest with each other. And
Hmm.
then the second thing is, and this is a personal thing, it feels really good to get stuff off my chest and to just share with my partner and be true to myself. You know, I can't show up and be the best version of me if I can't be honest about my feelings, my needs, my wants, you know, the things I like and don't like, and get these things off of my chest. Like, there's just no way that I'm going to be able to do that. And so it feels really good to feel like I can be my authentic, true self, and you still love me. You still want to be with me. You know, like, it's not the end of our relationship. And you and
Hmm.
I have shared some really, really hard things over the years. I mean, it's been tough. And
Hmm.
yet we have continued to move forward. So the last thing that I just kind of want to share before we're signing off here, the things that I think are important to remember about radical honesty. Number one, schedule time for these conversations, for the really big ones. You know, like, really do that for yourselves. I promise it will be so helpful. To be kind and respectful and focus on solutions. You know, when we come at things from a we versus a me perspective in a relationship, when sitting down to have conversations, it can change everything. And that is whether we are the one sharing the information or receiving the information. You know, when you sit down as a couple or you are radically honest together, thinking about, like, okay, let's focus on finding solutions here instead of I'm right, you're wrong, winning a game, because that's not what it's about. You know, if you're together, you're on the same team. And it's so important to remember that. And it's not always easy to, but it's really key to being able to have radical conversations. I almost said radical relationships.
Radical relationship.
Radical relationships. Do
Hmm.
you have anything
Yeah.
to share?
Anything else? But another thing that I really like about it, that I was going to share, is that it really helps to create or not necessarily create, but well, yeah, create, but first that it helps you become closer with your partner, right? Like that intimacy and all that combined just leads into having a more meaningful relationship, more meaningful partnership to a point that it almost feels like it's unbreakable because you put in the work, you respect each other, you don't have anything to hide. So yeah, it just creates a beautiful type of relationship, which we both know, and I think most people really know that it can be really difficult to find out there. But I think everyone has the capacity to create it for themselves.
Yeah. And this is coming from a man, by the way. I'm just sitting here thinking like, this is good. This is good for the guys to hear. The guys need to hear this. Because I think that it is, and again, this is just from my perspective. All right. I'm not trying to say that everyone is like this or putting everyone in boxes or categories, but I feel like it's difficult for women to be honest because we are taught from such a young age that we are supposed to, again, blend in and just play nice. And then I think that it's difficult for men to be honest because they don't want to upset their woman. They don't want
Mm-hmm.
to, um, they don't want to shake the ground. They don't want to cause problems. Men don't like to fight, like these sorts of things. But it's good to hear from you, as a man who's like, it can make your relationship more meaningful because it's just so true. If your relationship is only together because you are both being dishonest to one another, then that says a lot about a relationship. But really giving each other the trust to be, like risking it, I think is so worth it because then you find out what your relationship is really made of and you find out if this is really your person. And, it may not be your forever person, but it could be the person that you really grow with and learn with. And it's that stepping stone to the next person. Um, I just think it's huge. So, but thank you for
Mm-hmm.
sharing that from the masculine perspective, from the male perspective.
Yeah, happy to share that. Wait, so most guys or a lot of guys don't think like this?
What do you mean?
Well, that perspective, I think that I'm definitely not the only one, I feel like that there's a lot of other guys that feel the same way that I do. What do you think?
I don't know what you're talking about specifically.
Well, what I just share, kind of my perspective. You mentioned just that you appreciate it coming from a man's viewpoint, and I was just thinking, huh, there must be most or more guys that do feel this way as well.
Of course there
That
are.
makes sense.
There's plenty more guys. I mean, both you and I have seen throughout our relationship, even the great relationships that we've seen, I think we've been really surprised when we realize like they don't really share things with each other. They aren't really honest with each other. You know what I mean? They don't disclose things with one another. Um, and and so I think that's more so what I'm talking about, you
Mm,
know, is the benefits. Because again, like we have all of this conditioning about how we're supposed to be in the world. And then we get into a relationship with one another and we're trying to work through that conditioning. And I don't think people are dishonest necessarily because they're malicious. I think they do it to
mm-hmm,
protect themselves because they've
mm,
been taught that that's how they're supposed to, and they don't want to rock the boat. And I think,
mm-hmm.
especially with men, that yeah, they don't want to upset their partner. And so they, will not share information and or will share it in a way that isn't fully the truth, or, the ways that
Mm-hmm.
men do this are a little bit different than women. And again, I'm generalizing here, but this is what I've learned not only through my life, but in working with clients and those sorts of things. So you and I have
Okay.
talked about this.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's that social intelligence, social cues that I miss sometimes.
Yes, not to worry, not to worry. All right, folks. Well, Carlos, thank you so much. It was good to have you back, and we'll be having you back for more of these discussions, which I'm really excited about. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your time with this beautiful audience and also your perspective, because it's so valuable. So thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Thank you for having me for the third time. I think that must be a record by now. 3 times being a guest on this podcast. And yes, I'm excited for more topics to continue this conversation. And yeah, I think this is really important to shed the light on these difficult conversations and difficult topics that other couples may not be having, but that we believe is important for them to have. So I'm excited and look forward to the next one.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, folks. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you for tuning in. If this was helpful for you, please share it with someone else who could benefit. Leave a review on iTunes or Spotify. It's so helpful for this podcast. And be sure to sign up and join the newsletter community where I am sharing podcast updates, promotions, helpful resources, a number of different things. Thank you again for being here, sending so much love. And don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next time.